picture embedded in your head. You will make money, okay? And then you will have fun. Right now, how many of you are having fun? Right here, from this point to this point, the brown line, okay? That's your variable expenses. From here to here, okay, to this line here. Slightly light brown, right? That's your total fixed expenses. And only if you can cover your fixed expenses and your variable expenses, you make money. That's this area. Okay, sounds pretty simple fare, isn't it? Well, the point is, you know where we're going. We got to learn what the variable expenses are, what the fixed expenses are. And on top of that, variable expenses can be grossed up and must be grossed up. That's the only portion you can recover from your tenant if you allocate expenses to them. Very important to identify what the variable expenses are from the fixed expenses, because fixed expenses are considered you as an owner, your bad expense, your ownership expense you're not supposed to recover. Okay? So that tells you one thing. If you do not classify it right, guess what happened to you? Let's say your expense, variable expense really is up to here. You only thought it's up to here. You only recovered this part. You're not recovering from here to there. You lose them. Okay, awful important. So that's why I skipped to this one first, based on you guys' expertise, okay? And then the next picture, it's on page 17, I believe. Yes, 15, right here. Escalation on the base rent. Now, we're talking about chicken and the egg here, because I have to really make sure you know what the escalation is, what the gross up is, before we can, do all these fancy things. So I thought this is important to point out, and then we will go back to cover fixed expense, variable expenses, and the base rent and all this. Now, take a look at this. In this graph, by the way, this graph is worth $1 million. Okay? The other one was more than $1 million. Now, base rent include your operating expense. Here you go, variable expense and fixed expenses. We briefly mentioned earlier. And then you have owner cost expenses. You're not supposed to recover. That's your cost for owning property. And then, of course, you have profit margin. Okay? Now, you got to keep this picture in your head. Go home, sleep with it. Okay? And then you will have it. Then, on top of that, this area, base rent plus all or some operating expenses, okay? Or you have base rent right here. Expense exceed or beyond over expense stop or base year expense. That tells you we got to be very clear with what expense stop is, base year expense is. Otherwise, even though you learn the variable expense, fixed expense, you're not clear on this, you're not going to make them quite right. Okay? So then you also know your operating expenses can be increased at a CPI, right? Consumer Price Index, or at a fixed percentage you and your landlord, whoever, agreed on for first place. Help them to increase the bottom line and help them to increase the property value. Then the next reason, the selfish reason for you, yourself. If their property worth more when you sell for them, you make more commission, right? Or if you own the property, you definitely need to know this to increase your own bottom line, make money so you'll be having fun, more fun at least. Okay, so we need to learn all these three things. Break-even point, very simple concept. Your fixed cost, which I have not quite explained to you yet. Later on, well, one page I will, but here I need to explain a little bit. Fixed cost is the cost incurred to your building. No matter what happened, you shut the building down, you walk away. You say, I'm not operating this for the next 6 months, whatever. You still have to pay what? Your utilities, your water, those things, unless you turn it totally off, right? Like now, some people probably do. They're ready to hand the property back to the bankers, right? Otherwise, you got to fix expenses. So you use your fixed cost divided by your fixed cost ratio. 1 minus variable cost ratio is fixed cost ratio. What does that mean? Let's say it costs you $100,000 total operating expenses, right? $60,000 are variable, which vary based on your occupation. You have 5 tenants versus tenants, they're not the same result. They use more water, use more electricity. That's variable expense. Okay? Fixed expense is, like I said, no matter what, you're going to pay for those expenses. So variable cost has ratio. My example for you earlier, 100,000 into 60,000 variable is 60%. So here would be quickly what? 40%. Okay? So in other words, fixed cost divided by your fixed cost, in this case 40%, you will have your total break-even cost. In other words, that meant what? That means you are able to cover your $240,000 fixed expenses and your variable expenses. What's the variable expenses? 960 minus 240, right? Okay. The reason I want you to know this for sure, now tenant comes up to me, beg you, I want to modify my loan, modify my rent, not a loan. How much can you accept? Everything lies here, right? You say, well, it cost me $1.20 variable cost. If I don't have you, I don't have to pay this $1.20. So if you're going to stay with me, you at least what? Cover this $1.20. So the person walked to you and say, I was paying you $2.50. Now I can only afford to pay you $1.60. Take it or not. Now having fun. Take it or not. Yes, you should. Why? You cover his expenses because of he is here, right? And then you also are able to draw 40 cents to cover your fixed costs. Okay? That's what we call the contribution the guy can make for you. That's contribution margin. Contribution margin covers 2 things. One is your fixed cost, the other one is your profit. That's right here. This area and this area. That's your total contribution margin here. That's 90 cents. Okay, right here. 90 cents. That's how much? What did we say variable cost is? A fixed cost. Total fixed cost actually is $1.60, so this is 40 cents right here. It's a tricky number. How did you get at the net operating income? You see what I'm saying? This pretty soon will answer your question about, fixed costs, all those adjustments we need to make, all that stuff. Because a lot of them you cannot consider as operating income. Okay, your ownership cost is not operating income, right? Okay. So I list all challenges, all that. We probably won't have time to cover that. People tell you, oh, cap rate's 8%. If I were you, I ask, how did you get that net operating income? Was that by fiscal year? Was that by calendar year? Was that revenue fiscal year? Expense calendar year? Some people play tricks. I would be one of them. Because I understand how it is done, how it can be done. Okay? It doesn't say I am doing that, but I understand that can be done. Okay? So significantly. Why is that important? As we go, you will see you can only recover your variable cost. So just look at it here. If your variable cost is more than fixed cost, is good for you, right? This just gradually leads you to what we really are here for. Okay? Whole purpose for this picture here is to show you once you gross up your variable cost, once you add that back to your fixed cost, compare with if you didn't gross up right, or even you gross up right, you didn't separate, didn't identify your variable cost from fixed cost. Remember, net operating income divided by cap rate, it's your value, estimated value. So you want that net operating income higher, as high as you can go. So you do not want to minus much stuff. Okay? TIs, you wondered, if you often wonder why TIs don't go in my operating expense, here's why. It's your own cost. Okay? So TI is whatever the landlord or owner paid for it. You amortize them based on what? Lease term. 7 years, divide them by 7. Right? 10 years, divided by 10. Whatever. Then leasing expenses. This one I'm asked most often. Commissions, advertising, or promotion. Why that's not my operating expense? That's for the building, right? Yeah, it's for building, but it's owner's expenses, not operating expense. Yes.
So does the landlord on TI expense always on the primary term of the lease? That's the period that you get to. So it's appreciated.
Yeah.
Even though there's options, it's always just the
Right.
primary.
Yeah. Unless, in accounting concept, unless you know the guy told you, I will renew the new account. But to be on the safe side, really is the original years. So when you look at a financial statement now, you will question whoever presents you that financial statement. Does this make sense? First thing you look, what is my fixed cost ratio? What is my variable cost ratio, right? If fixed cost is 60, variable is 40, if you are buying this property, you run. You don't want to buy the property. You see what I'm saying? Either the books are messed up. Most likely probably are. They don't know any better. Right? They should, but they don't. Either that is messed up, or that may be true. If that's true, you don't want it either. A building with high fixed costs, especially apartments, if you have very high fixed costs, hardly you cannot recover your expenses.
Anna, thank you very much.
Thank you.